Pride goeth before a fall. In the mouth of a fool is a rod of pride. Let's take a look at the word we often see in English as pride.
I hear the farmers crying, kingdom come. I see the horrifying things we've done. I want to go way down by the end of the road, all the way to
Shalom, my friends. Aaron asked me to do an Otiot study on the word pride. He said he couldn't find any positive statements about the idea of pride, and to be honest with you, I don't think there are any, my friends. Aaron thought that perhaps the only reference to a positive idea about pride would be in Proverbs 14:3, but no. 14:3 is, in the mouth of a fool is a rod of pride. And that's not that's not a positive one. I don't think there's any way that you can find anything positive about the idea of pride. Yahweh hates a prideful man. He'll slap somebody down silly when they show pride. We can also look at Proverbs 16:18, and that's one we're probably all the most familiar with, and that is, before destruction, pride, and before a fall, a haughty spirit. Everyone's familiar with that one. Pride goes before a fall. And then there's Proverbs chapter 29, verse 23. The pride of a man brings him low, but the humble in spirit obtains esteem. That's pretty much all of it in a nutshell. Pridefulness is not a good thing. It's putting yourself above others, for the most part. But now here we can take a look at the Otiot. For the word pride, there are some variations on this, but the one that's most often seen is pronounced Gaon. Gaon. That's Gimel, Aleph, Waw, Nun. Gimel, Aleph, that's Ga. Waw is pronounced O. Nun is pronounced N. Ga-on. So the word we often see is pride. The reference to Proverbs 14:3 most often seen is the word proud, and that's Ga'awa. Slight variation, but we're going to look at this Ga'on, Gimel, Aleph, Waw, and Nun, because it comes up the most frequent of them all. The only real difference with Ga'awa is the letter He. Ga'awa is Gimel, Aleph, Waw, He instead of Nun. And let's first look at Ga'on. That's Gimel, picture of a foot. It represents Ruach HaKodesh, Father's Spirit. But it's a picture of a foot. It represents your walk in this life. Aleph, we should all be pretty familiar with this one now. We see it a lot, don't we? That's a picture of an ox head. And an ox because oxen are always yoked. And this is referring especially to being yoked to the Father. Now, a little note about yoking oxen. One has to know what they're doing. if you put the wrong ox on the wrong side, you're going to have a real problem when those two start moving together. It's very important that there's one ox that has to be on this side, there's another ox that has to be on that side. I don't know the details about it, but I know that if they aren't yoked in the proper positions, you'll have a nightmare on your hands. And of course, we want to be yoked to the Father, and I think that idea comes up because if someone's prideful, they're going to be pulling the yoke, in the wrong direction, and they're just going to foul themselves up because you can't move the Father. He knows where He's going, and oftentimes we don't. But Aleph, ox head, being yoked to Abba Father, being taught by Him, and recognizing Him as the strength and power that would operate in our lives if any strength or power is going to. Then we have my favorite, Wah, the tent peg. Pitch your tent with Elohim. And finally, Nun, a picture of the seed. Has to do with life, unstoppable motion, offspring, and heirs. So this word that we see is pride. It's talking about your walk with the Father, especially pitching your tent with Him pitching His tent with you being the good seed. Now, in this case, we're talking about pride. The English word that always comes up for gaon is pride, and it's always in the negative sense because it's talking about somebody who is not going the way. They're going their own way. They're walking on their own path. They are not yoked to the Father. They are looking to themselves as their own headship. They are not pitching their tent with Him. They're pitching their tent with darkness. They're pitching their tent with the world. They're pitching their tent, I guess, in terms of pride, they're pitching their own tent, period. It makes me think of someone who builds up a very successful business. And you'll hear them saying, I did this all myself. I did this for you, but I built this thing up from the ground. I am responsible for this success. I, me, mine. That's, pitching a tent all alone in the darkness. And then, Nun, the seed, here we're talking about the bad seed, because anyone who is not going the way on the narrow path that leads to the Father, anyone who is not yoked to the Father and they're yoking themselves to their own glory or to the things of the world, they're not pitching their tent with Him, they're pitching their own tent by themselves or pitching their tent with darkness. They are the bad seed. And that's what we're seeing here all the time. In Proverbs 14:3, the word there is ga'awah, and that's Gimel Aleph Wah. Same configuration we see here, but in place of Nun, it's the Ot Hey, which is a man with his arms raised. In this case, it points at the fifth dimension of spirit. And this could be an even darker reference. It's someone who is pitching their tent with the dark powers and principalities of the air. And they are not showing any awe for the Father. And also, the Ot Hey oftentimes would say, look, behold. In this case, it's like, whoa, this guy's really prideful. Danger. That kind of a thing. And that sums it up, my friends. There's nothing good about the idea of pride in the Father's eyes. And you might say that the Father has pride. I can't think of a scripture that does point at that. I wouldn't be surprised if there were, but, in his case, it's righteous pride. And if he has pride, it's certainly the right kind, and he's the only one who has any right to have pride of any kind. When it comes to you and I, no, pride is wanting to go your own way, not his way. And that is detestable to him. So, here's a short one on the Otiot. For the word pride in the Aramaic Hebrew, it's ga'on. And no matter how you look at it, it's not a good thing. I hope and I pray, my friends, that this has been a berekah to you. Shalom.
Let your kingdom come. Whoa. It's an ancient story that still gets told to those who hear and those who don't, by prophets and trees and things out of the blue. But once that cry has reached your ears, your heart gets filled by what you hear, and what you hear is just the sound of you.